Hey everyone, this is going to be a little bit of a different video than what you're probably used to because tonight I'm going to talk about the reason why I go by AstronoMisfit on my social media platforms. You may have noticed that if you follow me on X or Threads or Twitch or Instagram, my username is AstronoMisfit. And I've been asked by friends and colleagues alike over the years, why do I go by AstronoMisfit, right? It's kind of a unique name. And to be honest, it's kind of an uncomfortable question when I get it because it does go into a lot of details of my past. And there is a TLDR version for why I go by AstronoMisfit. And if you want the TLDR version is that I studied astronomy or astrophysics, and my favorite baseball team, the San Francisco Giants. So those of you know I love the San Francisco Giants. They have the SF logo right there. When they won the World Series of Baseball in 2010, they had a moniker known as the Band of Misfits because we had players who were kind of seen as outcasts from their previous team. We're talking people like Cody Ross or Edgar Renteria or Pat Burrell or Aubrey Huff and so on and so forth. People who were just seen as like castaways, and then they came together and they ended up winning the championship, the World Series that year. And so whenever you saw Misfit or Band of Misfit, they would always put the SF logo in the SF in Misfit. And so because of that, and because of my appreciation for astronomy, I put those two together, and hence AstronoMisfit was born. And so that is the TLDR version of why I go by AstronoMisfit. And so if you do not want to get into the whole personal childhood background origin story, then tune out now. But if you want to know more as to why I go by AstronoMisfit at more of a deeper level, then feel free to stick around. This is not something I normally would want to share on YouTube, and I was always hesitant to share with people who asked me this question, but I do now see the value of talking about my experiences because it could possibly resonate with somebody else who went through a similar experience in childhood and young adulthood, and perhaps it can show them that they're not alone in their struggle and that their experiences can be related to by other people. And so that is why I think I wanted to make this video. So let's get into the personal stuff now, if you are willing to venture there with me. So to start, we should probably start at the beginning. So I was born. Yes, I was born. I have two parents, both from the Philippines. My dad was born in Quezon City. My mom was born in Tagbilaran and ended up living in Bohol until the moment she met my dad in her mid to late 20s. My dad actually immigrated to the United States when he was about 4 years old. And so I had one parent grow up in the United States and one parent grow up in the Philippines. I am full Filipino, right? So born in San Francisco. So San Francisco, love it. It's my home. And when I was 3, I gained a brother, my younger brother named Chad. And when Chad was 3, so when I was about 6, my family and I learned that Chad had autism. And it was a pretty severe form of autism to the point where he never learned how to speak. To this day, he doesn't speak. And so he's nonverbal, but he can make sound, but he just doesn't have the ability to talk. And so you can imagine that being a pretty profound experience for young Kyle, just having a brother who was different from other children. And on top of that, my parents ended up divorcing or splitting up and then divorcing the next year, I think, or maybe the next 2 years from that. It all is a little bit blurry for me. I was very young at the time, so I don't remember all the details perfectly. But I was about 5 years old at that point when my parents had split, and I ended up moving in with my dad's parents, my paternal grandparents, and my brother was left living with my mom and her dad, who came from the Philippines to help raise him. So we were separated, okay? And I was living with my grandparents from the ages of about 5 to 10 or 11, and I was going to a school at the time that taught kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. So it was a kindergarten through 8th grade Catholic school, and so I was raised Catholic. And it was actually the same school my dad and my uncle went to when they were the ages of 5 and 14 to 14, sorry. And so I was a second generation student there. And I think kind of growing up in this, Catholic community with my friends, I think that was sort of one of the first indications I felt just very different from the other students, because obviously I have a brother who had some special needs, and I didn't know anyone else in my school who had a sibling like that. Most of my friends had siblings who did not have autism or a special need like that, and most of my friends, not all, but most of my friends had parents who were still together, living in sort of a normal 2-parent household. I was living with my grandparents, who were amazing, and I developed a amazing connection with my grandparents that I still have to this day with my grandmother. My grandfather has unfortunately passed, but living with my grandparents was great, honestly, because those of you who've had the pleasure and the privilege of getting to know your grandparents hopefully know that grandparents tend to spoil their grandchildren, and I was really no exception, even though they were my legal guardians and maybe should have disciplined me a little bit more. But I was told I was becoming a little bit of a brat living with my grandparents, so that was that. But that didn't last. So when I was 10 or 11, my dad and my stepmom, so my dad had remarried by that point, decided to take me and my brother in and raise us both. So Chad and I had been separated for about 5 years, but we had seen each other on the weekends. We would get together and we would trade weekends with our dad and our mom. And so I would see Chad every week, but it wasn't like we were living together during that time when I was living with my grandparents. But then when I was 10 or 11, I was living with Chad and my dad and my stepmom, and we were all in the same house together. Those years were a bit difficult because Chad was getting older, right? He was no longer a baby. He was, a young child, 8, 9, 10 years old. And, he had needs that were unbeknownst to me and my family, or at least unbeknownst to a certain degree by me and my family, because he couldn't talk, right? He couldn't tell us what he exactly needed. And so we really had to do a lot of inferring and just, gauging his behavior and determining his mood and seeing his gestures, seeing if he needed food or water or needed to use the bathroom or something like that. And I ended up living with Chad in the same room. So we shared a room. We actually shared a bed together, a really big bed together. And during those years, I really felt like I grew up quite a bit because I had to watch him a lot. And in a way, I kind of felt like I became a third parent in a way to him. And, I don't want to blame my parents or anything like that. I mean, I love my parents and I have a great relationship with them. And I don't think I would be the person I am without them or Chad. And I think that was very pivotal for me to learn the responsibility of having to raise him. But in a way, I kind of felt, even at that time, I kind of felt like, man, I'm missing out on parts of my childhood because, I feel like I'd have to grow up to raise him. And so that made things even harder, actually, when he left, actually. So Chad, at the age of, I think, 10 or 11, moved out of my dad and my stepmom's house and went to a home for for children, who had special needs like him. And so that was obviously a tough choice by my parents, but they felt that they could not provide a decent quality of life for him anymore, from my understanding. And so that's why he ended up moving out and living in a home for children with special needs. To this day, though, we do visit Chad, every weekend if we can, and my parents see him even during the week. I work during the week, so I can't see him during the week, but I'd still to this day try and see Chad at least once a week, because I think keeping that connection is so important. And I think Chad has really taught me how to be more accepting and open to people who may seem different to me. And I think that he's really just shaped the way I develop relationships with people, because I feel that when you have a relationship with someone who has those kinds of needs, you learn what it means to like love unconditionally, right? Someone who cannot really pay you back in certain ways, right? It's not like Chad can get a job and take me out to dinner or take me out to lunch, that kind of thing, right? And I feel like my relationship with him has really shaped the way I just view relationships in general and how I treat people in general. So when I meet someone who's just maybe different from me or might have some difference that I'm not accustomed to, I try my best not to judge and just try and learn more about them, give them more time, because I think that's just what he taught me, like having to live with him, having to grow up with him, just learning how to unconditionally give support and not judge. When he left, that was around the time when I was getting ready to go to high school, and high school was quite an experience for me, and maybe not in the best of ways. So if people want me to rank high school, college, and grad school, it goes college was like peak in terms of fun enjoyment, then grad school underneath that, and then high school. So high school was, I think, my least favorite time of my life, which I know it is for a lot of other people, so I don't think I'm unique in that regard, but I'm still going to talk about it because I think this is also where a lot of those feelings of feeling like a misfit and feeling like I don't belong or I'm just very different really manifested itself. And it's also the time when the Giants were winning those World Series and were going by the moniker of misfits, and so that's why I was like, oh, like I really feel that way. So I went to high school in San Francisco, and I went to a private high school in San Francisco, which I know is a really big privilege, and I'm not trying to discount the sacrifices my family made to get me to go to that high school, because it was a high school that had a really small student to teacher ratio. So there were only less than 10 students to every teacher on average for the classes, depending on what class you took. And I felt very just kind of out of place, like a misfit, when I got to high school, because it was a high school that I had never really heard of. And having gone to that Catholic kindergarten to 8th grade school, I was under the impression I'd be going to a Catholic high school in San Francisco with my friends that I had made for those 9 years. But my parents had other plans for me, and my dad thought it was very important for me to be exposed to other people who have different beliefs and weren't Catholic per se. I ended up going to this private high school in San Francisco, which the education was top tier. It was really great, and I definitely felt out of place because it was a high school, as you can imagine, if it being a private high school, where the socioeconomic imbalances were very apparent to me. I mean, my family isn't wealthy, and I went to school with a lot of wealthy kids, and I think it just made me feel just very different, right? Just imagine going to a school where you're taking the bus every day to go to school, but some of these kids are driving their new Porsche from their 16th birthday to school, right? I mean, it's that kind of sort of culture shock difference, and I think I really wanted to fit in, but I knew that I wouldn't, because I just knew I was different in a way. Like I really liked, for example, talking to my teachers. I just felt like I had a better connection with the adults than I did the other children. And I feel like that was always there for me, even back in kindergarten through 8th grade. I think partially that has to do with the fact that I grew up with my grandparents and I would hang out with them and some of their friends who were older. And so from a young age, I was always just comfortable talking with adults compared to other children. And that was really no exception in high school. But high school was really where I found my love for physics and math, my 3rd and 4th year of high school. But behind the scenes, I was really struggling, I think, with just these questions of like, who am I? Who do I want to be? How am I supposed to fit in? That kind of thing. And I'm ashamed to say that I tried hard to fit in, especially when I was younger, maybe my 1st and my 2nd year. But as I was getting closer to graduating high school, I started to realize that it was just easier for me to just be me and just take whatever came my way of just being me. And so this is also around the time where I stopped practicing Catholicism as well. So I currently identify as an agnostic, so I no longer practice Catholicism. It was during this time in high school where a lot of these sort of open-ended questions for me started becoming, I was willing to ask. I think when you go to Catholic school, even though I did have some doubts why I was in Catholic school, it's not something you want to openly maybe express if you don't have the guts to do, which I did not. I was just like, well, this is what I'm being taught and perhaps I should just go along with it. But once I was out of that environment, I could really just sort of think and ponder some more maybe existential, philosophical questions or disagreements I had with the Catholic Church. And I'm not going to get into that here, but I think that's kind of what led to me stop going to church every Sunday and eventually just stop practicing the religion altogether. But I don't have any problem with people who have a different religion from me. Like I said, I like to think my experiences with Chad has made me just really open to people of all stripes of life. And so, again, that's why I'm really grateful to him for giving me that ability to just connect to people who are different. And so when I went off to college, I really felt more comfortable being myself. And I think that's what made college really great, because I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to study physics, and I had the freedom to do it. And I was just sort of on my own, right? I wasn't living with my parents anymore. I wasn't raising Chad anymore. It was just me and my ability to just, explore my passion, my love for physics, and changed my major from engineering to mechanical engineering to physics my second year, and didn't look back. It was really, I think, one of the happiest times in my life being at UC Merced, because I really felt like I could just be me and just do what I really enjoyed doing. And I think school as well is what made me feel kind of like a misfit, right? Because it's not necessarily like cool to be good at school, at least it wasn't when I was growing up, but I found school to be, when I was younger, I'm talking about like in kindergarten all the way through high school was kind of like an escape for me, right? Like it was kind of an escape from the difficulties at home, right? Like with my brother and my parents' divorce, it was just like school was a place where I felt like I had some control. Like, as long as I work hard, I can get a good grade and my parents will be happy and I won't be seen as a burden, which is kind of sometimes how I felt at times, because I knew my parents had to deal with a lot with my brother alone. And I think I just wanted to stay out of the way and not be as much of a problem child as I could be. And I know we're jumping back and forth here, so I apologize. So we were talking about college years. And so, college years is where I got the idea that I wanted to be a professor of physics one day. And that's why I ended up applying to grad school, ended up getting into UC Irvine, and how I went all the way to get my PhD. But I summarized 6 years there in just like 10 seconds, but it wasn't that simple, right? I definitely feel that grad school changed me in multiple ways. Probably because COVID also happened when I was in grad school, and that changed everybody. But I think that the thing in grad school that I ended up realizing towards the end of grad school, which you've seen me make videos about in the past, so I don't want to dwell on those, but it was in graduate school that I finally started to realize what it actually takes to be a professor, to be a tenured faculty at like a R1 top tier research university. And I realized that I didn't really enjoy, or I didn't think I would enjoy that life, because I saw what my advisor, what his life was like, and the roles and responsibilities he had, and I just didn't feel like I wanted to put in that kind of effort. And maybe you want to call me lazy, that's fine, but I think I just did an honest assessment of what it would take to get there, and I just kind of realized I don't want to do that. And also when I realized that academia, it didn't, in my opinion, live up to what I thought it would be, which I had a very naive and fantastical vision of what it was like to be a scientist and be a scholar. But I'm sorry, I just don't think the way that academia is currently constructed really enables that pure love and desire to learn to the fullest. I don't think it really cultivates that, in my opinion. I think it really focuses on publishing, which is important, I can understand, but it can lead to these situations where you're publishing things that you may not fully be interested in, but it's what's going to get the grant money to come in, and you're just going to have to just stick it out, right? And I didn't like that prospect. I really want to feel like I have the freedom to use the skills that I've developed and the knowledge I've learned to try and learn other things for however long or as short as I want to. And I know, again, this sounds very naive, very much like a pipe dream, but I still try and live my life like that. Like I just want to live my life in a way where I'm trying to be that ideal scholar, be that ideal scientist in my mind, and be untethered to the constraints that the academic system puts on you, I think, if you're in the system. And so all of that to say is, again, another example of how I felt very different from other people who just kind of maybe just accepted that, oh, this is just how it is, how it's going to be, and you're just going to have to wait till you're 40 maybe for job security or whatever as an academic. And I think when I realized that I didn't want to wait that long and it wasn't really what I thought it was in the first place, it was kind of where I think I just started becoming more defiant and just saying, hey, I don't care if I'm going to be seen as weird for saying I don't want this. I just want to do what makes me happy and be unapologetically myself, and I'll take whatever consequences come from that. And I think that's kind of my outlook of life right now. I mean, to this day, I feel like I'm doing what I want to do, and I feel like I have a semblance of control, and I don't really care strongly about what the perception of what I'm doing with my life is from other people, which ultimately I think is the place one should aspire to get to one day, just to feel like you can really take your own life into your hands and make what you want out of it. So this has been a long video, and I think I've gotten to the point where I feel like I fully kind of explained the trajectory of my life that can, at least someone can look at and say, okay, I can see why you would probably, feel like a misfit in life. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think we tend to feel like, we should always be fitting in, but and there are reasons for that, right? Like, in ancient times, it's not good to be out of the tribe because then you have to fend for yourself. But I do feel like we live in a day and age where you can just be a little bit different, and as long as you're sticking to your mission in life and not impeding on anyone else's and not disrespecting anyone else's boundaries, it's totally okay to just unapologetically be you. So all that to say, thank you for listening to this long video, this long personal video as to why I go by AstronoMisfit. Hopefully the TLDR version did it justice, but the long-winded childhood origin story version of it was a lot. I feel like I've been drained but just by talking about it for nearly half an hour, but I do hope it is useful maybe to anyone out there who had a similar experience or experiences to me, and that you can know that, hey, we don't have to be necessarily defined by the challenges. We can still make life what we want it to be, even if we didn't feel like we had that control when we were younger. So with that, I'm exhausted. I'm going to let you guys go, but I really appreciate you sticking around listening to this. If you stuck around this long, I will be making more happy videos in the near future, and I'll I'll also be making more videos kind of like this where I'm talking, because I really like this new setup I got. I just recently got the equipment to do this kind of fun setup, and so maybe expect more videos kind of this format, me just talking into this mic and sharing my thoughts and my experiences. So with that, thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe if you found this entertaining or helpful in any way, and I will see you in the next video.